When I saw my daughter Celestine collapse in tears after fixing that impossible engine, I never imagined the billionaire watching from the shadows was about to change our lives forever. The scene unfolds. Picture this. It's 3:47 a.m. in a dimly lit aircraft hangar in Phoenix, Arizona. My daughter Celestine stands alone next to a $50 million jet engine that every expert in the country had declared unfixable. Her hands are covered in hydraulic fluid. Her dark hair escaped from its ponytail hours ago, and she's staring at diagnostic readings that show something impossible. The engine is running better than it ever did when it was brand new. Character. Introductions. Woven into action. Celestine Rivera, 23 years old, has just accomplished what teams from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and 3 other major aerospace companies couldn't do in 6 weeks. She's my daughter, and I taught her everything I know about engines in our garage, but what she did tonight went far beyond anything I could have imagined. She took apart a machine that cost more than most people's houses and put it back together with a solution so elegant, so unexpected, that it bordered on genius. The emotional core. But she's not celebrating. She's crying because she knows this moment, this impossible success, might be the last victory she ever gets to claim. Tomorrow morning, her supervisor Rex Morrison planned to fire her. The layoffs at Meridian Aviation were supposed to start with her, the young woman who dared to take on a project that made seasoned engineers shake their heads in disbelief. Building the mystery. What she doesn't know, what none of us knew, is that Thaddeus Blackwood, the CEO of Apex Aerospace Industries, had been standing in the shadows for the past 4 hours, watching every move she made. This man worth $3.2 billion didn't just stumble into our struggling little hangar by accident. He came here specifically to see if the rumors were true. If there really was a young engineer brilliant enough to solve problems that stumped entire departments at his company. Setting up the stakes. This story isn't just about fixing an engine. It's about my daughter fighting for her dreams while watching her little brother Dante slowly lose his battle with a rare autoimmune disease. It's about a family that's been knocked down so many times, we've forgotten what it feels like to stand up straight. It's about the moment when everything you've ever wanted seems impossible, until someone proves that impossible is just another word for undiscovered. The promise to the audience. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly how my daughter went from being the most underestimated person in that hangar to becoming the youngest chief innovation officer in aerospace history. I'm going to tell you about the phone call that made her scream, the conversation that made a billionaire change his company's entire hiring philosophy, and the moment when our family learned that sometimes the biggest rewards come from the smallest acts of courage. Character relationship, foundations. Celestine has been my pride and joy since she first picked up a wrench at age 8. Her best friend Valentina Chen has stood by her through every rejection letter and late-night study session since their freshman year at MIT. Her brother Dante, despite being stuck in hospital beds more often than not, has been her biggest cheerleader, always believing his big sister could change the world even when she stopped believing it herself. Immediate tension. But first, let me take you back to where this all started, 3 weeks earlier, when a phone call at 2 a.m. shattered our sleep and set in motion a chain of events that would test everything my daughter had ever learned about engines, about persistence, and about what happens when the world finally notices what you're truly capable of achieving. 3 weeks before that life-changing night, I watched my daughter Celestine stumble through our front door at 11:30 p.m., her MIT engineering degree doing nothing to protect her from another soul-crushing day at Meridian Aviation. Her coveralls were stained with hydraulic fluid and disappointment, and I could see in her eyes that familiar look of someone questioning whether their dreams were worth the fight. "Dad, I spent 8 hours today organizing filing cabinets," she said, dropping her toolbox with a heavy thud. 8 hours. While Tommy Rodriguez, who barely graduated from community college, got to work on the Henderson Industries turbine repair. Rex Morrison looked me straight in the eye and told me documentation was more suited to my attention to detail. She made air quotes with fingers that should have been designing revolutionary engines, not alphabetizing maintenance records. Meridian. Aviation occupied a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix, the kind of place where dreams went to die slowly. The company survived on contract scraps from bigger firms, fixing what others couldn't be bothered with. Celestine had taken the job 18 months earlier after her 47th rejection letter from major aerospace companies. Each rejection followed the same pattern: impressive credentials, glowing recommendations, then suddenly no available positions once they met her in person. Her cramped studio apartment told the story of someone living for others. Dante's medical bills covered, her kitchen table like a paper snowstorm. His rare autoimmune condition, something called familial Mediterranean fever, required treatments that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Insurance covered the basics, but the experimental therapies that might actually save his life remained stubbornly out of reach. I'd raised Celestine and Dante alone since their mother died in a car accident when Celestine was 16. Maria had been the dreamer in our family, always pushing Celestine to reach higher, think bigger, never settle for what the world said was possible for a girl from our neighborhood. After Maria died, I tried to be both parents, but some days I wondered if I was enough. "You remember what your mother used to say?" I asked Celestine that night as she heated up leftover takeout. "She'd tell you that the world's loss of faith in you doesn't change what you're capable of achieving." Celestine managed a tired smile. Mom never had to deal with Rex Morrison. But I saw something flicker in her eyes, that same spark she'd had at 8 years old when she first helped me rebuild a 1967 Mustang engine in our garage. Even exhaustion couldn't completely extinguish the fire Maria had lit in our daughter. Valentina Chen called every night around this time, their friendship forged through late-night study sessions at MIT and strengthened by shared frustration with an industry that seemed determined to waste their talents. "Girl, you're too good for that place," Valentina would say. "Morrison's intimidated by you. He knows you could redesign their entire operation before lunch." But intimidation didn't pay medical bills. Celestine sent 60% of her salary to cover Dante's treatments, living on ramen and determination. Her bedroom walls were covered with aerospace design sketches, revolutionary engine concepts that would never see daylight because the industry couldn't see past her age and gender. Dante called from the hospital that night, his voice weak but determined. "Celeste, you know I'm getting stronger, right? The new treatment is working. You don't have to carry this burden alone." But we all knew the insurance company had approved only 6 months of the experimental therapy. After that, we were on our own. "I'm not carrying anything," Celestine told him, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "We're a family. We carry each other." That was Celestine, brilliant enough to redesign jet engines in her sleep, stubborn enough to keep fighting when everyone else would have given up, and loyal enough to sacrifice her own dreams for the people she loved. She'd inherited Maria's fierce determination and my mechanical intuition, but the combination created something entirely new, something the aerospace industry was too blind to recognize. Every morning at 4:45 a.m., Celestine's alarm would shatter the silence of her studio apartment. She'd dress in those same oil-stained coveralls, grab her father's old toolbox and drive to Meridian Aviation with the kind of hope that only comes from having no other choice. Rex Morrison would be waiting with another day of menial tasks designed to remind her of her place in his narrow vision of how the industry should work. But Celestine had learned something important from watching her mother fight cancer and losing, from watching Dante battle an immune system that attacked his own body, from watching me struggle to keep our family together after Maria died. She learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept other people's limitations as your own reality. "Tomorrow's going to be different, Mija," I told her that night, though neither of us could have imagined just how different it would become. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I knew it was bad news because good news never arrives when you're deep in sleep, dreaming of better days. Rex Morrison's voice crackled through Celestine's phone with barely contained panic. "Rivera, get to the hangar now. We've got a situation that could either save this company or bury it completely." Ophelia Sterling's private jet had made an emergency landing at Sky Harbor Airport 6 hours earlier. The pharmaceutical heiress, worth more than some small countries, had been flying to an urgent board meeting when her experimental hybrid engine suffered what the initial reports called catastrophic multi-system failure. The aircraft landed safely, but the engine, a revolutionary biofuel hybrid worth $50 million, was completely destroyed. By the time Celestine arrived at the hangar, the engine had already been transported to Meridian Aviation's facility. It sat there like a fallen giant, its sleek titanium casing cracked open to reveal the technological carnage inside. I'd seen plenty of destroyed engines in my 40 years as a mechanic, but nothing like this. It looked like someone had detonated a bomb inside a Swiss watch. 3 teams have already looked at this thing, Morrison explained, his usual condescending tone replaced by something approaching desperation. Boeing sent their best diagnostics team. Lockheed Martin's failure analysis group spent 2 days here. Even Sterling's own engineers from her research division declared it a total loss. The insurance company's ready to write a check for $50 million and call it quits. But Sterling's estate had made one final offer. Any aerospace company that could repair the engine and return it to operational status would receive a $500,000 emergency repair contract. For Meridian Aviation, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, that money represented salvation. Here's the thing, Rivera, Morrison continued, and I could see the trap forming in his words. Management's decided to give you this project. Congratulations. You finally get your shot at the big leagues. His smile was all teeth and malice. Of course, when you fail, and you will fail, it'll give me all the justification I need for the layoffs, starting with you. The timing couldn't have been worse. That same week, Dante's doctors delivered news that hit our family like a sledgehammer. His condition was progressing faster than expected. The experimental treatment he'd been receiving was losing effectiveness, and the next phase of therapy would cost $200,000. Insurance had already denied coverage, citing the treatment's experimental status. 6 months, maybe 8, if we're lucky, the doctor had told us privately. Without the advanced treatment protocol, his immune system will eventually win this war against his own body. Celestine stood in that hangar, staring at an engine that had defeated the best minds in aerospace engineering, knowing that her brother's life hung in the balance alongside her career. The $500,000 repair contract wouldn't just save Meridian Aviation, it would save Dante. Valentina arrived within an hour, taking one look at the destroyed engine and shaking her head. Celeste, this isn't just broken. This thing looks like it exploded from the inside out. The biofuel injection system is completely fried. The AI diagnostic computers are showing error codes I've never seen before, and the harmonic stabilizers are so damaged I can't even figure out how they were originally configured. The other engineers at Meridian gathered around like vultures watching a dying animal. Tommy Rodriguez, who Morrison always favored despite his minimal qualifications, laughed openly. If Harvard PhDs couldn't fix it, what makes anyone think she can? This is going to be entertaining. At least when she fails, we'll know why, added another voice from the crowd. Some jobs are just too big for certain people. I wanted to defend my daughter, to remind these men that she'd graduated summa cum laude from MIT while they struggled through state schools, but Celestine placed a hand on my arm. Let them talk, Dad. Words won't fix this engine. That night, after the hangar emptied and the mockery faded to silence, Celestine began her analysis. She worked methodically, documenting every damaged component, every failed system, every impossible problem that had stumped teams of experts. The more she learned, the more hopeless it seemed. The engine's revolutionary design integrated 7 different cutting-edge technologies that had never been combined before. When one system failed, it created a cascade effect that destroyed the others. It wasn't just mechanical damage. The engine's artificial intelligence had essentially suffered a nervous breakdown, corrupting its own programming in ways that seemed irreversible. Dad, what if they're right? Celestine asked me around 4 a.m. as we sat in the empty hangar, surrounded by diagnostic printouts and shattered dreams. What if this really is impossible? I looked at my daughter, remembering the 8-year-old girl who once fixed our lawn mower when I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. Mija, impossible is just a word people use when they can't imagine the solution yet. Your mother always said you don't see problems the same way other people do. Maybe that's exactly what this engine needs. Day 14. Celestine hadn't slept more than 3 hours straight in 2 weeks, and I was starting to worry that my brilliant daughter was pushing herself toward a breakdown. The engine sat in the center of the hangar like a metallic puzzle that had defeated everyone who dared approach it. Diagnostic screens showed the same cascade of failures that had stumped 3 major aerospace firms, and Morrison was already drafting Celestine's termination paperwork. That's when everything changed. I was bringing Celestine her 4th cup of coffee when I heard her talking to herself, something she'd done since childhood when working through complex problems. "You're not broken," she was saying to the engine. "You're confused. There's a difference." She'd been staring at the same diagnostic readout for 20 minutes, but suddenly her posture changed. The exhausted slump in her shoulders straightened, and I recognized that look. It was the same expression she'd worn at age 12 when she figured out why our neighbor's lawnmower kept stalling, a problem that had baffled the repair shop. "Dad, remember when you taught me about carburetor flooding?" "In the Mustang?" she asked, her voice gaining energy for the first time in days. "You said the engine wasn't broken, it was just getting too much of what it needed. The solution wasn't to fix the carburetor, it was to teach it when to stop drinking." I nodded, not understanding where she was heading, but trusting her instincts. "Completely. Everyone's been treating this like mechanical failure," Celestine continued, pulling up engine schematics on her tablet. "But look at these error patterns. The biofuel injection system isn't broken, it's learning the wrong lessons. The AI is supposed to adapt to different fuel densities and atmospheric conditions, but somewhere in flight, it started confusing. Biofuel viscosity readings with altitude calculations." She began sketching rapidly, her hands moving with the kind of confidence I hadn't seen since she was a child, building impossible contraptions in our garage. The engine didn't fail mechanically. It failed intellectually. The artificial intelligence had a nervous breakdown. Valentina arrived with dinner and found Celestine surrounded by printouts, laptop screens, and hand-drawn diagrams that looked like something between engineering schematics and abstract art. "Please tell me you've discovered something that doesn't involve complete system replacement," Valentina said. "Better," Celestine replied. "I'm going to teach this engine how to think like a 1940s aircraft engine while maintaining modern efficiency standards." The plan was audacious and completely unprecedented. Instead of replacing the damaged AI systems, Celestine would create analog feedback loops that would essentially retrain the engine's artificial intelligence using principles from vintage aircraft engines. She would manually recalibrate every sensor, every decision tree, every adaptive algorithm. "It's like teaching a smartphone to think like a rotary phone while keeping all its modern capabilities," she explained to Valentina. "The engine needs to forget everything it learned wrong and start over with basic mechanical principles." Morrison appeared in the hangar doorway the next morning, expecting to find Celestine admitting defeat. Instead, he found her wielding a soldering iron with surgical precision, connecting 1940s-era mechanical sensors to cutting-edge digital processors. "What the hell are you doing to that engine?" Morrison demanded. "Fixing it," Celestine replied without looking up. "Unless you'd prefer I stick to filing your paperwork. You're destroying company property. Sterling's insurance will never cover this if you make it worse." "It can't get worse," I interjected, stepping between Morrison and my daughter. "Every expert in the country said it was unfixable. Let her work." For the next 36 hours, Celestine worked with the kind of focused intensity that scared me. She'd enter a zone where nothing existed except the problem in front of her and the solution taking shape in her mind. Valentina brought food that went untouched. Dante called with encouragement from his hospital bed. I stood guard, keeping Morrison and his doubts away from the miracle taking shape in our hangar. "You know, what you're doing could end your career if it doesn't work," Valentina warned during one of Celestine's brief breaks. "My career's already over if this doesn't work," Celestine replied. "Morrison's made that clear. But Dante's life isn't over. Not if I can help it." With 18 hours left before Morrison's deadline, Celestine made the decision that would define her future. She completely rewrote the engine's core programming, replacing complex, modern algorithms with simplified decision trees based on mechanical principles that had kept aircraft flying for decades. "I'm not trying to make it smarter," she explained as she worked through the night. I'm trying to make it wiser. At 3:30 a.m., she inserted the final connection. The engine's diagnostic systems began their startup sequence, and for the first time in 2 weeks, none of us were breathing. At 3:47 a.m., Celestine pressed the ignition sequence, and the hangar filled with a sound I'll never forget. The perfect, harmonious hum of an engine that wasn't just working, but working better than it ever had before. The diagnostic screens lit up with numbers that made no sense at first, performance metrics that exceeded the engine's original specifications by 23%. Celestine stared at the readouts in disbelief. "Dad, this can't be right. The fuel efficiency is off the charts. The emission levels are cleaner than anything I've ever seen. How is this possible?" I watched my daughter's face transform from exhaustion to wonder to pure elation. She'd done something that every expert said was impossible. But more than that, she'd improved on perfection. The engine wasn't just repaired, it was revolutionized. "Congratulations, Miss Rivera." We both spun around to find a man in an expensive suit stepping out of the shadows near the hangar's back entrance. He was tall, probably in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from owning half the world. I'd never seen him before, but something about his presence commanded attention. "Who are you?" Celestine asked, wiping grease from her hands on her coveralls. "How did you get in here?" "Thaddeus Blackwood," he said, extending his hand. "CEO of Apex Aerospace Industries. I've been watching you work for the past 4 hours." My blood went cold. Apex Aerospace was the biggest name in the industry, the company that had rejected Celestine's application 6 times. What was their CEO doing in our little hangar at 4 a.m.? "I'm sorry, what?" Celestine's voice cracked slightly. "You've been watching me?" Blackwood smiled, pulling out his phone to show a video recording. "Miss Rivera, 3 months ago, my head of recruitment flagged your MIT thesis on biofuel integration systems. When I heard rumors that someone was attempting to repair Sterling's engine, I had to see for myself if the reports about your unconventional approach were accurate." He gestured toward the now purring engine. "What you've accomplished tonight doesn't just solve Sterling's problem. You've solved a problem my company has been working on for 5 years. We've spent $40 million trying to achieve the performance metrics you just created with analog feedback loops and 1940s engineering principles." Celestine looked at me, then back at Blackwood, her brain clearly struggling to process what was happening. "I don't understand. If you've been working on this, why didn't you bid on the repair contract?" "Because I wasn't interested in the repair contract," Blackwood replied. "I was interested in the engineer." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Miss Rivera, I'm offering you the position of Chief Innovation Officer at Apex Aerospace Industries. Starting salary, $2.8 million annually, plus a $500,000 signing bonus that I understand you need for your brother's medical treatment." The hangar went completely silent except for the gentle hum of the repaired engine. Celestine's face went through every emotion imaginable: shock, disbelief, hope, fear, and something approaching terror at the magnitude of what was happening. "You investigated my family?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I investigate anyone I'm considering for a position that will reshape the future of aerospace engineering," Blackwood said gently. "Your brother's condition, your family's financial situation, your mother's death when you were 16. I know about all of it because I needed to understand what drives someone to attempt the impossible when everyone else has given up." Celestine's legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the concrete floor. The tears came suddenly and completely, 2 weeks of pressure and exhaustion, and impossible hope flooding out all at once. I knelt beside her, my own eyes filling as I watched. My daughter's entire world change in the space of a single conversation. "Why?" she managed between sobs. "Why me?" Blackwood crouched down to her level. "Because in 40 years of running aerospace companies, I've never seen anyone solve a problem by making it fundamentally better instead of just functional. You didn't repair Sterling's engine, you evolved it. That's exactly the kind of thinking my company needs." Valentina, who had been standing frozen in shock, suddenly screamed with joy. "Celeste, do you realize what just happened? You didn't just get a job, you got the job." My daughter looked up at me through her tears, and I saw Maria's determination, mixed with her own unique brilliance. Dad, I can save Dante. I can actually save him. You already did, Mija, I told her. The moment you refused to accept that engine was unfixable, you saved him. Everything else is just the world finally catching up to what I've always known about my daughter. Blackwood stood up, extending his hand once more. So, Miss Rivera, are you ready to change the aerospace industry? Celestine wiped her eyes, stood up, and shook his hand with fingers still stained with hydraulic fluid and dreams finally coming true. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Apex Aerospace Industries, watching my daughter address 200 of the world's top engineers at the company's annual Innovation Summit. The scared young woman who used to organize filing cabinets at Meridian Aviation was now explaining how her heritage wisdom integration methodology was revolutionizing engine design across the entire aerospace industry. The solution wasn't about adding more technology, Celestine told the audience, her voice carrying the confidence that comes from proving everyone wrong. It was about teaching advanced systems to remember the fundamental principles that made flight possible in the first place. Dante sat in the front row. His color finally returned after months of successful treatment. The experimental therapy had worked beyond our wildest hopes. Not only was his autoimmune condition in complete remission, but his doctors were using his case study to help other patients with similar conditions. The Dante Rivera Foundation, which Celestine established with her signing bonus, had already funded treatment for 12 young people facing the same impossible medical bills we once couldn't afford. Valentina, now Celestine's Deputy Chief Innovation Officer, whispered something that made my daughter laugh during the presentation. Their friendship had survived success just as it had survived struggle, maybe because they both remembered what it felt like to be overlooked and underestimated. After the summit, Blackwood pulled me aside in his corner office overlooking the Phoenix skyline. Mr. Rivera, I need you to understand something. In 43 years of running aerospace companies, I've hired thousands of engineers. But I've only met 3 people who could see solutions that didn't exist until they imagined them. Your daughter is one of those 3. He gestured toward the wall covered with patents bearing Celestine's name. She's filed 17 revolutionary designs in 6 months. Our competitors are scrambling to understand methodologies that we're already implementing. The Stirling engine repair wasn't just a fix. It was the prototype for the next generation of aircraft propulsion. The personal transformation in our family went deeper than financial security. Celestine had moved us into a beautiful home near Dante's treatment center, but more importantly, she'd restored something I thought we'd lost when Maria died, the belief that our family was capable of achieving extraordinary things. Dad, you know what the strangest part is? Celestine asked me one evening as we worked together in her new garage, a space that would make most professional mechanics weep with envy. I spent so many years trying to prove I belonged in their world, but I succeeded by refusing to think like them. She was right. The aerospace industry had tried to fit her into their existing framework, but Celestine had succeeded by creating an entirely new framework. Her hybrid approach, combining cutting-edge technology with time-tested mechanical principles, was now being taught at engineering schools across the country. Morrison had been quietly let go from Meridian Aviation after word spread about how he'd treated the engineer who saved Stirling's $50 million engine. The company itself was acquired by a larger firm, partly based on their association with the Celestine Rivera breakthrough, though ironically, she was no longer there to benefit from the success. Sometimes I think about those engineers who laughed at me, Celestine told Valentina during one of their weekly coffee meetings. Not with anger, but with gratitude. Their doubt made me more determined to prove that impossible was just another word for undiscovered. 3 months after her breakthrough, Celestine received a letter that made her cry for the second time that year. It was from a 13-year-old girl in Detroit named Zara, whose school class had studied Celestine's engine repair as part of their STEM curriculum. Dear Miss Rivera, the letter read, my teacher says you fixed something that couldn't be fixed because you thought different than everyone else. I want to be an engineer like you, but people at school say girls aren't good at math. Can you tell me how you stopped listening to what other people said was impossible? Celestine framed that letter and hung it in her office next to her MIT diploma and her first Apex Aerospace patent. It reminded her daily that her greatest achievement wasn't the technical breakthrough or the career success or even saving her brother's life. Her greatest achievement was proving that brilliance comes in forms the world doesn't always recognize until someone refuses to accept its limitations. The Stirling engine now sits in the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, displayed as an example of innovative problem-solving that changed an entire industry. But for our family, it represents something much more personal. The moment when everything we'd lost seemed to come back to us, transformed and stronger than before. Your mother would be so proud, I told Celestine on the day she received her first industry award. Not because you became successful, but because you stayed true to who she raised you to be. As I watch my daughter continue to revolutionize aerospace engineering, as I see Dante healthy and pursuing his own dreams of becoming a doctor, as I witness Valentina building her own reputation as an innovative leader, I'm reminded of something Maria used to say. The world doesn't break people who know how to fix things. It just tests them until they're ready to fix what's really broken. Celestine didn't just repair an engine that day. She repaired our faith in what's possible when you combine brilliance with determination and refuse to let other people's limitations become your own reality.